Jesus said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days is the Passover, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified." Then the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders of the people assembled at the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and plotted to take Jesus by trickery and kill him. But they said, "Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people." Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him to you?" And they counted out to him 30 pieces of silver. So from that time he sought opportunity to betray him. On the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, Jesus instructed his disciples to prepare a place in the city to celebrate the Passover. That evening, Jesus shared the meal with the 12. During supper, he revealed that one of them would betray him, which deeply saddened the disciples. Judas, already planning the betrayal, subtly asked if it was him, and Jesus confirmed it. As they ate, Jesus took bread, blessed and broke it, saying it represented his body. He then took a cup of wine, gave thanks, and shared it, saying it was his blood of the new covenant, poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. He also told them he would not drink wine again until he did so in his Father's kingdom. After singing a hymn together, they left for the Mount of Olives. After the Last Supper, Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane. He told them to sit while he went further to pray, taking Peter, James, and John with him. Deeply sorrowful and distressed, he told them his soul was overwhelmed with grief and asked them to keep watch with him. Going a little farther, Jesus fell on his face and prayed, asking his Father if it were possible to let the cup of suffering pass from him. Yet he surrendered to God's will, not his own. While Jesus was still speaking to his disciples in Gethsemane, Judas arrived with a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent by the chief priests and elders. Judas had arranged a signal to identify Jesus, a kiss. He approached Jesus, greeted him as Rabbi, and kissed him. Jesus responded, "Friend, why have you come?" At that moment, the crowd stepped forward and seized Jesus. One of Jesus' followers, later identified as Peter in other Gospels, drew a sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. But Jesus told him to put the sword away, reminding him that those who live by the sword will die by it. He said he could call on more than 12 legions of angels for protection, but the scriptures had to be fulfilled. Jesus then turned to the crowd and questioned why they came out to arrest him like a criminal, even though he taught daily in the temple. Still, he said this all happened to fulfill the words of the prophets. At that point, all the disciples deserted him and fled. After his arrest, Jesus was taken to the house of Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and elders had gathered. Peter followed at a distance and sat in the courtyard to see what would happen. The religious leaders were looking for false testimony against Jesus so they could put him to death, but they couldn't find any reliable witnesses. Finally, two came forward claiming Jesus said he could destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Caiaphas stood and challenged Jesus to respond, but Jesus remained silent. Then the high priest demanded under oath that Jesus declare whether he was the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus answered, "It is as you said," and added that they would see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. In response, Caiaphas tore his robes and declared Jesus had spoken blasphemy. The council agreed he deserved death. Then they spat on him, struck him, and mocked him, saying, "Prophesy to us, Christ. Who is the one who struck you?" Early in the morning, the religious leaders handed Jesus over to Pilate. Judas, filled with regret for betraying him, returned the silver and took his own life. The priests used the money to buy a burial field, fulfilling prophecy. Pilate questioned Jesus about being the king of the Jews, and though Jesus affirmed it, he remained silent against further accusations. Pilate offered to release a prisoner, Jesus or Barabbas. The crowd, influenced by the leaders, chose Barabbas and demanded Jesus' crucifixion. Despite Pilate finding no fault in Jesus and receiving a warning from his wife, he gave in to the crowd. He washed his hands, claiming innocence, and handed Jesus over to be crucified. The Roman soldiers mocked Jesus, dressing him in a scarlet robe and a crown of thorns, and taunted him as the King of the Jews. They struck, spat on, and mocked him before leading him away to be crucified. Simon of Cyrene carried Jesus' cross to Golgotha, where Jesus was crucified. He was mocked as King of the Jews and hung between two criminals. Darkness fell, and Jesus cried out before dying. The temple veil tore, the earth quaked, and witnesses declared, "Truly this was the Son of God." And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani?" That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Joseph of Arimathea placed Jesus' body in a new tomb and sealed it with a large stone. The religious leaders secured the tomb with guards, fearing the disciples might claim Jesus had risen. As the stone sealed the tomb, the world seemed to hold its breath. The religious leaders, satisfied, posted guards to ensure no trickery could steal the body. The disciples, shattered by grief, hid in fear. Yet beneath the surface of defeat, a divine plan was unfolding, one that not even death could undo. For 3 days the tomb stood silent, a stark reminder of the world's darkest hour. But the story was far from over. The earth had quaked at his death. Soon it would tremble again at his triumph. The king who had surrendered to the cross would rise in glory, shattering the chains of sin and death forever. This was not the end. It was the dawn of redemption.